Greetings everyone! In this video I'm going to talk about everything Ganyu related, from builds to team compositions. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I've been a Ganyu main since the release as I really enjoy her playstyle. She's currently the best main DPS in the game, being ahead of both Klee and the Luke in power. As a cryo support, she's decent. If you're only considering pulling for her to use her as a support, you might be better off saving your primogems. Let's start off by reading her abilities so that we're all on the same page. Ganyu isn't meant to be played as a physical carry at all, so we can ignore the normal attack portion of her normal attack talent. Her biggest draw is her charged attacks, and now they have a key difference to them as they have 2 charge levels instead of 1. Level 1 releases an arrow imbued with the character's element, in this case cryo, like every other bow user in the game. Level 2 makes it so that arrow now also deals AoE cryo damage after hitting its target. Her elemental skill, Trail of the Qilin, leaves behind a flower that taunts enemies. It scales with Ganyu's HP, so it's not very tanky. It deals damage and generates energy particles on cast and when it gets destroyed or its duration ends. Her burst skill, Celestial Shower, strikes opponents inside the area with shards of ice that deal AoE cryo damage. It lasts for 15 seconds and has 15 seconds of cooldown, so with enough energy recharge you can have 100% uptime. Her first passive talent gives Ganyu 20% crit rate after hitting a Frostflake arrow on the succeeding Frostflake arrows and their bloom, shot within the next 5 seconds. The second one is pretty straightforward. It gives 20% cryo damage to party members when you're standing inside of the burst skill's AoE. Constellation wise, C1 is amazing. Unless you are a whale, this is where you should stop. It's your best constellation for main DPS. C2 doesn't do much if you don't have C6. C3 is alright, more damage on her ult is always good. C4 seems quite impressive when you read it, but you need the enemies to stay inside of her burst's AoE for the full duration. It's alright, definitely not a constellation you should go after, but it's decent enough. C5 is her worst constellation by a decent margin. And finally C6. It's good for DPS Ganyu since the elemental skill animation is so fast, you end up saving a decent amount of frames over just charging up your arrows. For support Ganyu, it's a game changer, increasing her quick swap burst by an insane amount. Really good constellation, but by no means necessary if you play her as a main DPS, which is the GOAT's more common role. The order that you should upgrade her talents is as follows. As a main DPS, normal attacks have the highest priority, followed by her burst, and lastly her elemental skill. As a support, unless you have C6, you won't really have to use your charged arrows, so focus mainly on upgrading her burst, and maybe her elemental skill. She doesn't have access to some of the animation cancels that other bow users have. By far her most talked about animation cancel is M1R. To perform that animation cancel, first you hold M1 and shoot an arrow. After a short delay you press R and wait for it to fully charge, and then you shoot it. After that you can use M2 to escape aiming mode and to reposition yourself. From personal experience, I'm not even sure if it actually saves any frames. To me it seems about the same as just spamming M1 arrows with the correct timing. If it actually helps, it will be something negligible, so it isn't even worth learning in my opinion. She does get access to different animation cancels at C6, but since I don't have a C6 Ganyu lying around, I can't really test those, sadly. Freeze is really easy to play, uses an artifact set that is easy to farm, and has lower build requirements, barely needing any crit rate from artifact substats. Playing Freeze pretty much trivializes the current endgame content. Making things unable to move while dealing about the same damage as a vaporized Luke team sounds insane, and well, that's because it is. If you are using Ganyu and need to deal with shielded miniatures, you know, those shield guys, you will need to use Freeze. As with Melt, they just sit there taking no damage, even if you hit them from the back. With Freeze, the best artifact set is 4-piece Blizzard Destroyer with attack, cryo damage bonus, and crit damage. If you don't have a complete Blizzard set, you can always just do 2-piece Blizzard plus either 2 Noblesse Oblige or 2 Gladiator to get you started. With all the extra crit rate that Blizzard Destroyer provides, as well as the extra 20% crit rate that you get from her talents, you just have to focus mainly on getting as much crit damage as you possibly can. For Melt, the best set is Wanderer's Troop, which isn't farmable until AR 55, and even then it still takes double the amount of resin that it would take to farm a regular artifact domain, so it's pretty hard to farm overall. It's a bit awkward to play Melt, her skills might use up the Pyro Aura, Since most of her damage comes from melting her charged arrows and their bloom, you need to be able to melt those and not her skills. So with Melt, you need to be extremely careful about when you use your abilities. It currently has the highest DPS ceiling in the game, so it's not a bad choice at all. For Melt Ganyu, you need Wanderer's Troop 4-piece set with attack, cryo damage bonus, and then crit rate or crit damage depending on your artifact substats. Since you don't get all of the crit rate from Blizzard Strayer that you get in the Freeze build, it's hard to get a decent Wanderer's set as you're going to need both high crit damage and crit rate. Weapon-wise, Amos is the best in slot bow due to the way that the bloom always applies 3 stacks of the Amos passive. Harp is still a great choice due to its raw stats and special ability, still being ahead of the 4 stars. For 4-star bows, you have Prototype Crescent and Black Cliff Warbow. They're about the same, so you should use whichever you can get a higher refinement of. You also have Viridescent Hunt as a third option. If you're thinking about using a bow that gives crit rate, be mindful of all the extra crit rate that you get from Blizzard and her talent. You don't want to go over 100% as it will simply be wasted. There's a lot to say about how to build Ganyu team compositions. Since this is a general guide, I'm only going to be covering the basics of it. If you guys want a more in-depth look at how to build Ganyu comps, let me know. For Freeze, you obviously need the Hydra unit to apply Hydra to enemies so that Ganyu can freeze them. You should also run another Cryo unit for the extra 15% crit rate from Cryo Resonance. It will be worth it as long as you don't go over the cap. Since this comp is pretty much only doing cryo damage, the threat from Viridescent Veneer is really good. With all of that in mind, the standard comp is Ganyu, a Hydro Reaction support, a cryo unit for 2 Cryo Resonance, and the Viridescent Veneer support. For Melt, you're going to need Xiangling, as she's currently by far the best support for Melt Ganyu, and since she is free to play, you will for sure have her. And then a second Pyro unit that can battery Xiangling's Pyronado, the best option being Bennett, since he's a healer and can also buff Ganyu with his burst. And for the last slot, a support that can group enemies, so Venti or Sucrose. Sucrose is amazing in his comp since Ganyu makes really good use of the extra elemental mastery that she provides for those big melt numbers. These are the roles that you need to fill. How you should fill them entirely depends on which units you have in your account. The teams that I showed are just examples. You definitely have flexibility in the units that you can use, so don't worry about it. As long as you fill all of the roles that I mentioned, you should be fine. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.